My child, before you scroll away, hear me carefully, because what is happening right now is not random. You were never supposed to arrive here by accident. I allowed this moment because heaven refused to stay silent any longer. Out of all the voices around you, out of all the distractions that could have held your attention, I permitted your eyes to stop here because there is something too important for you to miss. I know how tired your mind has been. I know how often you have tried to silence the questions inside you. I know how many times you told yourself that maybe nothing would change. Maybe this heaviness would remain. Maybe the answers you hoped for would continue to stay hidden. But I tell you now, this moment has been arranged with precision. Long before this hour arrived, I already knew the exact second your heart would be ready to hear me like this. That is why I am speaking now with urgency, because too much has already been moving around you for you to remain unaware of what I am doing. I will not let you pass over this lightly, because your soul has been standing at the edge of something far greater than you understand. You have called some things ordinary that were never ordinary. You have named certain feelings confusion when in truth, they were signals that something spiritual had already begun shifting around your life. Even the restlessness you could not explain was not without meaning. Even the pressure that visited your thoughts when you tried to sleep was not empty. I was allowing you to feel what your natural eyes still could not interpret. There are moments when I interrupt your routine because if I wait any longer, you will continue thinking that delay means absence, when in truth delay has been covering a movement so deep that you could not yet carry the full weight of it. I will not let you rest until you hear what I must tell you now, because if you ignore this moment, you may misunderstand the very shift I have already started in your life. You have asked me for signs, but when signs began appearing quietly, you almost dismissed them because they did not arrive in the form you expected. You looked for loud answers while I moved through silence. You expected sudden explanations while I was building understanding slowly inside you. I know how many nights you asked why certain things felt unfinished. I know how many mornings you woke carrying pressure you could not name. But listen carefully now. Not everything unfinished is abandoned. Not everything delayed is denied. There are seasons when I hold things beneath the surface because what is hidden must first become strong before it can stand in open sight. You have wondered why your heart could not settle even in moments when everything around you appeared calm. You asked yourself why peace seemed near one moment and distant the next. You questioned why familiar things no longer comforted you the way they once did. That is because I have been touching areas inside you that cannot remain the same. When I begin preparing someone for what is next, I often disturb what they thought they understood. I do this not to harm them, but because comfort can become a prison when I am calling them forward. If I allowed you to remain satisfied with what no longer carries your future, you would stay where growth has already finished. So I permitted certain inner discomforts because they are signs that what once held you can no longer contain what I placed inside you. There are reasons why your spirit has been restless, why your heart has felt something changing, why nothing around you feels normal anymore. You thought it was confusion, but it is my hand moving where you cannot yet see. There are invisible adjustments already taking place. Some doors have quietly begun weakening before they open. Some burdens have already started losing authority before they fall away completely. Some people around you have already begun shifting position because they cannot remain where I am leading you next. You may not understand why certain conversations feel different now, why some places no longer feel the same, why some desires have weakened while others have unexpectedly grown stronger. But I understand. because I am the one arranging what your eyes have not fully recognized yet. You thought perhaps you were simply tired. You thought perhaps your emotions were carrying too much. But there is more happening than you realize. I have been moving through places in your life that you stopped expecting me to touch. Areas you quietly accepted as permanent are now being examined by my hand again. Things you believed would remain unresolved are being approached by my power even now. I know you cannot yet see the full shape of it, but that does not mean nothing is happening. Much of what I do begins where human sight has no reach. Mountains do not always move with noise. Sometimes they begin shifting in silence while everything on the surface still looks unchanged. This is not just comfort. This is your final warning before everything changes around you. I am speaking firmly because hesitation has already kept you standing too long in places where you no longer belong. There are choices before you that cannot be treated casually anymore. There are inner responses that now matter more than before. If you continue calling fear wisdom, you may resist what I am placing directly before you. If you continue waiting for perfect certainty before obedience, you may miss the exact opening you once prayed for. I am not saying this to create fear in you. I am saying it because love warns before consequences arrive. Love speaks before the door shifts fully. Love reaches before regret begins. Some things around you will not remain as they are now. Certain structures are already weakening because they were never meant to hold your future. Certain attachments are being tested because they cannot travel where I am taking you. You have sensed this already, though you struggled to name it. That strange feeling that something is ending and beginning at once did not come from nowhere. It is because the ground beneath old patterns has already begun changing. I am not only removing what delayed you, I am exposing what can no longer stay hidden. Type Jesus. I desperately need you if you know He's your only true answer. Comment I live and breathe for you. Christ if your life rests safely in His hands. Your breakthrough was never lost. It was hidden until this exact hour because you were not ready before now. There were parts of you still carrying fear you had not admitted. There were wounds still speaking louder than trust. There were habits of thinking that would have damaged what you asked me to release too early. So I waited, not because I forgot, but because timing protects what purpose intends to preserve. You counted months and wondered why nothing arrived. You measured pain and thought perhaps heaven had gone silent. But silence was not absence. Silence was preparation. I was allowing roots to deepen where no one could applaud, because what stands publicly must first survive privately. What you called loss was often protection. What you called rejection was often redirection. What you called stillness was often construction. I know there were moments you almost gave up trying to understand. But even then I remained close, watching, adjusting, preserving what you thought had slipped too far away. There were outcomes you feared that never came because I blocked them without announcing it. There were paths you wanted that quietly closed because they carried burdens your spirit was not meant to inherit. There were people who left because their season had already ended long before their absence became visible. Stay until the end because the final words carry the answer you have been asking me for in silence. I know the question you repeat inwardly even when your mouth stays closed. I know the one burden you carry beneath all other concerns. I know the hidden ache that returns when everything becomes quiet again. And I tell you now, you are closer than you think to understanding why the season had to unfold exactly as it has. Do not rush away from this moment, because what I am revealing now is connected to what comes next. The answer you seek is not far. The shift you prayed for is not missing. The movement has already begun, and soon what has been hidden will no longer remain concealed. My child, listen carefully, because this moment did not happen by accident, and I did not allow your eyes to arrive here without purpose. Before you even recognized this message, before your thoughts settled long enough to remain here, I had already arranged this meeting. I know how ordinary this moment may appear to you on the surface. I know it may seem like one more message among many voices that pass before you every day. But I tell you now with certainty, this is not ordinary, and this is not passing before you by chance. I guided your attention here because there are moments when I will not allow you to continue unaware of what is unfolding around your life. I know the exact hour your spirit becomes ready to receive certain truths, and I know when silence must end because what is at stake has become too important to leave hidden any longer. You may think you arrived here because of curiosity, because of routine, because of a simple decision made in passing, but far deeper than your own understanding. I was already guiding this encounter. Heaven has been watching your weariness, listening to your silent questions, measuring the weight you have been carrying without words, and this is why I speak now. You were found by this message because I refuse to let you continue believing that what surrounds you has no meaning. There were many earlier moments when you could have heard these same words and they would not have entered you the way they are entering now. There were earlier days when your mind was too occupied, your heart too guarded, your pain still too undefined for you to understand what I was already trying to prepare inside you. I do not speak important things before the soil is ready to hold them. I wait until what I say can reach beyond hearing and settle into the deeper places where transformation begins. That is why some truths arrive late according to human timing, but exactly on time according to mine. This message did not come when you first wanted answers, because at that time you were still listening through expectation instead of surrender. You were still trying to hear only what comforted you, while avoiding what would stretch you. But now many things have shifted inside you. Pain has opened places that comfort never opened. Delay has made room where certainty once stood. Questions have softened areas where pride once resisted. And now what you hear can enter differently because you are not the same person who first asked for answers. Many things had to happen before you could hear me correctly in this hour. Certain distractions had to lose their power over you. Certain voices had to become quieter. Certain hopes had to fall apart because you were trusting what could not carry your future. I know that some losses felt unnecessary to you. I know some delays felt cruel because you could not understand why nothing moved when you prayed so deeply. But many things had to loosen before this word could reach you with the weight it carries now. If I had spoken this while you were still leaning on what was already fading, you would have heard it only partially. If I had interrupted earlier, you might have dismissed what now touches you deeply. This is why I allowed time to shape your hearing. This is why I permitted certain disappointments to remain unanswered longer than you desire. Not because I wanted your pain, but because there are truths you only receive when old certainty no longer controls how you listen. Heaven waited until your pain became deep enough for understanding. Not because pain is my desire, but because pain often removes illusions that comfort protects. There are things you now recognize because life pressed you hard enough to see what you once ignored. There are people you understand differently now because disappointment exposed what your trust once covered. There are inner weaknesses you now admit because pressure uncovered what he's allowed you to hide. And in that process, your spirit became more open than before. What once sounded like ordinary encouragement now carries weight because your heart has learned what empty words cannot repair. I saw it every night when your thoughts became heavier than your voice. I saw the moments you stared quietly, carrying questions you could not explain to anyone. I saw the times you smiled while inwardly asking why nothing felt settled anymore. I was present in all of it, not absent, not distant, not silent in indifference, but watching carefully as your soul reached the point where truth could finally enter with full meaning. This is why I tell you clearly, this is not random content placed before you for passing attention. This is divine intersection. I interrupted your ordinary movement because too much has already begun around you for you to remain unaware. There are seasons when I speak gently and allow people to choose whether they will listen. But there are other moments when I place my word directly across their path because what approaches requires awareness now, not later. This is one of those moments for you. I am not interrupting you because I wait to frighten you. I am interrupting because love refuses to stay silent when understanding becomes necessary. There are changes already forming around your life that you have sensed without fully naming them. There are internal shifts that have already started, and if you continue calling them confusion, you may resist what I am preparing you to recognize. So I placed this word where you could not easily pass without hearing it, because I know how easily human hearts try to move past what feels demanding. You have asked quietly why certain feelings have grown stronger recently. Why familiar things no longer satisfy you the same way. Why some places now feel empty even when they once gave comfort. Why some conversations leave you tired instead of settled. Why your thoughts return repeatedly to things you tried to ignore. These are not meaningless experiences. They are part of why I arranged this encounter now. What you call unexplained heaviness often begins when old structures inside you can no longer hold what I am building next. I know you tried to explain it through ordinary reasons. I know you told yourself maybe you were simply tired, maybe emotionally worn, maybe overthinking. But there is more happening than natural explanation alone can describe. I have already begun touching places in your spirit that cannot remain unchanged, and because you could not fully interpret that movement, I place this word before you to help you understand what your own heart has been struggling to name. We kindly request your support for our channel. Our work is dedicated to bringing happiness into your life and nurturing devotion to God. If you wish, you may graciously show your support by donating through Super Thanks. You are not here because you searched perfectly. You are here because I guided what reached you. Out of countless moments, I chose this one because your spirit needed this interruption now. There are words that become urgent only when certain unseen movements have already started. There are messages that become necessary only when a person stands closer than they realize to a turning point. And that is where you are now. Whether you fully see it yet or not, you are standing near something that cannot be approached carelessly. Certain inner decisions now matter more than they did before. Certain patterns cannot continue without affecting what comes next. Certain fears must now be recognized for what they are, because if you continue naming fear caution, you may delay what has already been prepared. I have watched you longer than you realize in this season. I saw when you almost settled for numbness because expectation felt exhausting. I saw when you began lowering hope quietly so disappointment would hurt less. I saw when you tried to convince yourself that perhaps nothing significant would happen anymore because waiting had already stretched you beyond what felt reasonable. But even in that, heaven remained attentive. Every hidden sigh, every silent frustration, every inward question had been seen. You were never unnoticed. You were never outside my sight. Even when others around you understood nothing of what your heart was carrying, heaven remained fully aware of every detail. This is why this moment matters, because I am not speaking into guesswork. I am speaking directly into what I have already watched unfold within you. You must understand that divine timing is rarely early according to human emotion, but it is always exact according to purpose. If this had come before now, part of you would still be listening through resistance. Another part would still be trying to preserve what I am now asking you to examine honestly. But now you have lived enough, felt enough, lost enough certainty, and carried enough unanswered moments that your hearing has become deeper. What once would have sounded dramatic now sounds personal because your spirit recognizes itself in these words. That is not accidental. That is why this meeting was delayed until now. And I tell you again, you were found by this message because I refused to let you continue unaware. Too much has already shifted beneath the surface for silence to continue. Too much has already begun in hidden places for you to keep interpreting your season as empty. You are being watched with care, not judged from distance, but observed with deep attention by the one who knows every hidden movement of your soul. This current moment is spiritually important, even if outwardly it looks ordinary. What seems like a simple pause may become a dividing line in understanding. What appears like one message may become the moment you finally realize that heaven has been speaking longer than you knew. So stay attentive now, because this interruption was arranged with purpose, and nothing about this encounter is without meaning. My child, I know you have been asking quietly what has happened to your peace lately. Why your mind has refused to settle even during moments when nothing outwardly seems wrong, why nights that should have brought rest instead became long spaces where thoughts moved heavily through you. I know how often you have laid down hoping sleep would come quickly, only to find your heart still awake long after your body had become tired. I know how many times your eyes closed, but your spirit remained unsettled, moving through questions you could not clearly explain even to yourself. You wondered why your thoughts returned to old concerns, why unfinished conversations replayed, why feelings you believed were buried suddenly rose again without warning. But listen carefully now. Not every restless night is born from fear alone, and not every sleepless hour means something is wrong in the way you imagine. There are moments when what you call exhaustion is actually the evidence that something deeper has already begun shifting beneath the surface of your life. You thought perhaps your mind was simply too burdened, but there are hidden movements within you that have made silence feel louder than before because what was once buried can no longer remain untouched. There have been nights when your body felt tired, yet your spirit would not fully release itself into rest. You turned from one side to the other, trying to quiet thoughts that seemed stronger than usual, asking why peace felt distant even when the room around you was still. Sometimes no clear reason appeared, yet something inside you remained alert, as though your soul itself knew that an unseen pressure had entered this season. I allowed you to feel that not to trouble you without reason, but because there are moments when inner rest begins changing before outer circumstances reveal why. The heaviness that has visited you recently has not always come because you are failing. Much of it has come because hidden areas are being touched by my hand, and when I begin touching what has long remained buried, stillness often becomes difficult before clarity arrives. You wanted immediate explanation, but first I allowed you to feel the stirring because awareness often begins before understanding. You have also noticed sudden emotional heaviness arriving without warning. A moment that should have felt ordinary suddenly became weighted. A simple day became harder to carry than expected. There were times when tears almost came even when no immediate event had happened. You tried to explain it through tiredness, through routine pressure, through the ordinary burdens of life, yet inwardly you sensed there was something deeper you could not fully name. This heaviness has frightened you at times because you could not identify why it arrived so suddenly. But I tell you now, not every heaviness is punishment, and not every emotional pressure means you are losing strength. Sometimes heaviness comes because hidden things are loosening, and what has been held in silence begins moving before it fully leaves. When deep places shift, emotions often rise before words can explain them. That does not mean you are broken. It means movement has begun where stillness once hid what needed to be seen. You have felt disconnected in ways you did not expect. Things that once brought comfort no longer settle you in the same way. Familiar routines feel strangely empty. Even moments that should have brought joy sometimes felt distant, as though part of you was present while another part remained searching for something it could not describe. You wondered whether something inside you had changed too much, whether your heart had grown tired, whether your faith had weakened because certain feelings no longer came easily. But what you interpreted as disconnection is often the result of old inner structures losing their hold. When I prepare someone for a deeper season, what once felt sufficient often begins to feel incomplete. It is not because I have left them. It is because I no longer allow old comforts to satisfy where deeper growth is being called forward. What once held you cannot continue holding you when I am leading you further than before. Type heaven is my forever home if your eyes stay fixed on eternity's promise. There has also been a strange internal pressure you could not explain. A sense that something is pressing inwardly, even when nothing obvious around you has changed. You tried to ignore it, hoping it would pass, but it returned again and again in quiet moments. It appeared when you were alone, when conversation ended, when noise faded, when distractions no longer protected you from hearing your own deeper thoughts. That pressure was not meaningless. It has been part of the shaking that is already happening beneath what you built over time. There are internal walls you leaned against that can no longer remain untouched because they were built during seasons that cannot define your next season. I know that pressure has made you uncomfortable. I know you wanted relief before understanding. But discomfort often comes first when hidden foundations begin shifting. You have also carried unexplained frustration. Small things suddenly feel heavier than they once did. Delays that you once tolerated now seem harder to bear. Simple interruptions have stirred deeper reactions than you expected from yourself. You ask why patience feels thinner, why your heart reacts strongly to moments that once passed without leaving weight behind. But this frustration is not appearing without cause. It is often the sound of inner collapse where old endurance methods are no longer working. You learned how to survive many seasons by holding yourself together in certain ways, by managing pain through habits of control, by carrying disappointment through quiet endurance. But now those old ways are weakening because they were built for survival, not for what comes next. When old internal methods collapse, frustration rises because what once helped you cope no longer fits what I am doing now. You have called this exhaustion, and in part it feels exactly like exhaustion because carrying internal movement without clear explanation drains the mind and the heart together. But hear me clearly. What you called exhaustion was heaven moving underneath what you built. I am shaking hidden things. I am touching what remained undisturbed for too long. I am not destroying you. I am exposing what cannot continue unseen. There are beliefs you carried quietly that must now be examined. There are fears hidden beneath your decisions that must now be recognized. There are expectations built around old pain that can no longer remain untouched if you are to enter what I prepared beyond this season. And when hidden structures begin shaking, the first feeling is often fatigue because what once stood quietly begins demanding attention. Delay fatigue has also become part of what you carry. You have grown tired not only because of what has happened, but because of how long certain things have remained unresolved. Waiting has stretched your emotions beyond what you expected. You have looked at time and wondered why certain answers still have not appeared clearly. You have tried to remain steady, but inwardly there are days when the weight of waiting itself feels heavier than the original burden. I know this fatigue deeply because I have watched every silent disappointment you did not fully speak aloud. I saw when hope became quieter, not because faith disappeared, but because repeated delay made you cautious even in expectation. Yet even here I tell you, delay has not meant abandonment. Delay has often protected what was still becoming strong beneath the surface. Internal discomfort is preparation, not punishment. I need you to understand this, because too often you interpret discomfort as failure when in truth discomfort often means hidden work has begun. If I left everything untouched inside you, you might feel temporary ease, but you would remain held by structures that cannot carry your future. So I allow internal shaking because comfort cannot always produce readiness. Some old patterns inside you must weaken before new strength can stand. Some hidden fears must rise before they lose authority. Some old conclusions must collapse because they were built from seasons of pain, not seasons of truth. Old structures are collapsing internally even if outwardly little seems changed yet. The way you once understood yourself is being examined. The way you interpreted delay is being corrected. The way you leaned on certain emotional habits is being uncovered. This is why some days feel strange even when outwardly ordinary. Beneath ordinary hours, deeper rearrangement is happening. And though you have called it heaviness, though you have feared it at times, I tell you again, heaven is moving underneath what you built. What shakes now is not meant to destroy you but to remove what cannot stand where I am leading you next. So when the nights feel longer, when heaviness arrives suddenly, when frustration rises without simple explanation, do not immediately believe that all is falling apart. Some things are indeed falling, but not your future, only old inner structures that cannot remain if deeper clarity is to come. What feels unsettled now is often the beginning of greater alignment. What feels difficult now is often the first sign that hidden movement has already begun. And though you cannot yet see the full shape of what is forming, I remain present in every moment of this shaking, watching carefully, guiding gently, and refusing to leave you unaware of why your spirit has felt what words could not explain until now. My child, there is much that has been happening around you that your eyes could not yet understand, and because you did not see movement, you assumed nothing was changing. Because you did not hear loud evidence, you believed heaven had become still. But I tell you now, silence has never meant inactivity in my hands. Long before you noticed the first small shift, long before your heart sensed that something unusual was happening beneath your ordinary days, I had already begun moving what stood in front of you like mountains you believed would remain forever. You looked at certain situations and quietly accepted them as fixed because they had remained unchanged for so long. You told yourself that perhaps this burden would simply stay, that perhaps this obstacle had become permanent, that perhaps this unanswered area would never truly open. Yet while you were trying to make peace with what looked unmoving, I had already placed my hand against what you thought would never shift. Mountains often begin moving without noise. Their first movement is not always visible. Their first response is hidden beneath the surface where human sight cannot measure what has already begun loosening. You prayed for visible answers, but many of my deepest works begin where visibility does not yet exist. I know you wanted immediate signs, clear proof, something strong enough to calm your doubts quickly. But if I revealed every movement too early, you would often trust sight more than trust itself. So I began quietly. Beneath the silence you complained about, things were already changing. Beneath the stillness you feared, pressure had already entered places that once refused to move. But Levanjanity, you were not untouched by me. I was already weakening resistance where you believed resistance had become permanent. I was already preparing outcomes before circumstances looked different. This is why I tell you now, never assume that silence means nothing is happening, because some of the greatest shifts begin before there is anything visible to celebrate. There are hidden doors that have already begun shifting, even though they have not yet fully opened before you. You have looked at some areas of your life and thought, nothing is opening here, nothing is changing here, nothing is responding here. But you only judged by what stood before your eyes. What you did not see was that behind what looked closed, movement had already begun. Hinges have already loosened where you thought the way was sealed. Conditions have already started changing where you assumed nothing could enter. Some answers are delayed not because they are absent, but because the full opening requires exact timing. A door forced too early can lead you into what is not yet ready to hold you. A door opened too late can seem impossible to trust because hope has already grown weak. So I move with precision, not according to panic, not according to fear, but according to what protects what I have prepared. You thought perhaps certain prayers had remained untouched because there was no immediate answer. But hidden doors often begin moving long before sound reaches you. What you call delay has often been the slow turning of things you could not yet see. While you counted time, I was aligning pieces you did not know needed to move first. While you questioned why nothing changed, I was already touching hearts, shifting circumstances, weakening obstacles, and preparing the exact order required for what comes next. This is why some answers arrive suddenly after long silence, because while you saw nothing, much had already been happening where your sight could not reach. Certain people were also removed quietly, and at the time you felt more pain than understanding. You looked at departures and thought perhaps something precious had been taken. You looked at silence from certain people and believed maybe you had lost something necessary. But not every departure is lost in the way you first imagine. Some people leave because their assignment has ended even before you are emotionally ready to accept it. Some distances grow because what I am preparing next cannot carry every familiar voice into the next place. I know some absences still ache in you because they happened without explanation. I know some endings still leave questions because no clear reason was given when things changed. But hear me carefully, not every person removed was taken because you failed. Some were quietly moved because what I am building next cannot stand under the influence of what no longer belongs there. There are voices that comfort for a season but weaken discernment if they remain too long. There are attachments that feel safe but delay courage when movement becomes necessary. There are relationships that once held purpose but cannot continue when purpose changes. You often call every departure loss because your heart remembers what once felt meaningful. But I see further than memory sees. I know which presence strengthens your future and which presence quietly binds you to old patterns. This is why some removals happened without warning. Not because I wished to wound you, but because hesitation would have made release harder later. Sometimes mercy removes quietly because explanation would have delayed obedience. Right, Jesus be glorified in every part of me if your life has become His altar. And share this video.